And a painting as large and as complex as this, at what point did you say to yourself, it's finished?
3 hours before they had to pick it up. And that's the truth, actually. I was painting it like this and timing because I remember painting the water. I just wanted to put one less delays, and I just, and toned it down and tried to do all that. And it was really because it's like any strive, and I'm not being, I'm a perfectionist, and people have got to pry the pictures out of my hands in order to get them sometimes. And my dealer complains about it constantly. So, but that's true. It was very hard to know because I always saw something that I needed to change, especially something that was going to be so public as this.
And so at what point did you say, I no longer will change it, I'm going to accept what's here?
Like I said, just right before they picked it up. they were going to pick it up, you understand, I owed them the painting. We had an agreement that the painting was going to be here in August before I think it was the 4th year of the, after 9/11. And then we had an agreement, and I made that as a conceptual date that I had to have that finished, and I pushed it to the edge and made sure that they had the picture.
I would just like to add to the comment on the Joseph. In the days following 9/11, 8 years ago, we received telephone calls and emails from friends all over the world expressing their sympathy to us and to the American people. And since then, some of them have come to this museum and seen your wonderful work, and it's hard to pry them loose. So internationally, you are felt.
Thank you.
And I have another question. It's my understanding the painting is going on loan.
I hope so.
And how would you accomplish the move of this passing?
Oh, that's for you guys. It is on one piece. A little FYI. It took 5 people, very gracious people, to stretch the canvas, and 3 attempts to do it. It's at the absolute limit of commercially available canvas, and it was originally going to be 24 feet rather than 18 feet, and it got to be unbearable as far as the structure. So there's a lot of things I didn't know that I didn't know before I attempted the picture, which these little tidbits kind of don't make their way to our history. It is an interesting thing.
I just have a question. It's such a unique project, and while you're creating it, do you get feedback from someone you wouldn't trust to say, am I crazy? Is this
I probably would have said I was crazy.
I just wondered, is there...
I did get feedback from that. I've had people, it's really hard to be both a visionary and work with a committee. And I think, part of it is trusting your own idea, and then also, knowing that you're the person that's going to fall if it doesn't work. So part of it is I want people to feedback, but then I also want to do something that's my vision. And I think I had some of that with the museum. I just know that my real audience was trying to, the most heartening thing is when people like children come and look at it and understand it. And that means at least partly I've addressed who I want to address, which is people that are, people who don't always go to museums. There are a lot of people who know a lot about art, but then there's art for people who don't know a lot about art as well. And I want to function on both of those levels.
I was just wondering, you talked about the red in the paintings, but I was curious about the blue.
The blue? Well, the basic palette was red, white, and blue. I wanted to sort of skew it in different ways. What did you want to ask about?
No, I was just wondering if there was symbolism behind that.
Symbolism?
Yeah.
Just in the flag type, the idea of, and the red was sort of carried again to sort of give the idea of the continuous piece of the ribbon of the blindfold throughout. You notice that's mainly part of this. And then the blue tells you a lot about that these 2 children are these 2 grown up. And it's an early 13th century device, sort of called continued narrative, where you sort of play on times where they can be both separate figures but also represent. You notice in these 2 figures here, they're holding their hands together, a black and white girl, and here they're the same but handcuffed together. This says something about before something happens, we're sort of led to it, but after the catastrophe happens, we're sort of bound to it. In other words, we can't escape. what's happened. So one is sort of prescient, and one is sort of a regret or some sort of stasis. One thing about allegory I wanted to bring up is there's this word out there that's very interesting, and it's called hypostasis. And hypostasis is kind of what an allegory attempts to create. It's both time, the sort of ever-going idea of time, and it's also a fixed point. And you know, when something moves, you can't be both moved and fixed. But it comes from religion, which was talking about Christ being both God and man. But in allegory, it really means of combining these two opposite things. You know, where you have a narrative, but you also have things that are atemporal, where you have history, which is both past and present, or where you have time sort of fixed. And so the idea of an allegorical picture is sort of that impossibility of trying to fix movement while the movement is going on at the same time. It's sort of, again, having sort of narrative and poetry together, abstract and concrete. These sort of binaries, this dialectic that's happening. And I think that if you read that and try, when you look at the painting again, think about how it sort of represents a fixed moment, but also something that's moving. I mean, it was 9/11, but it's also now and it's also then, which is something about time.
It's my understanding that you designed benches and the frames.
I did. This was Troy Stafford was my frame maker, and we designed the frame and the bench together, and to sort of make a somber. It was reminding me of sort of the somber thing of that Vietnam memorial that was all black, you know, where you could sort of sit and contemplate, and the roses were sort of an echo of this that was going on. So I wanted it to be where people could sit and contemplate, you know, it quietly. And on a wonderful day, if you ever come certain times in the museum, it's very quiet, and it's a wonderful time to look at pictures.
Where did you get your models from?
Well, one was Mr. Pitkin, who's in the back, neighbors and friends, actually, that I talked to and begged to pose for the picture.
With such a monumental work, I'm wondering why you signed it Graydon and not your whole name or your last name.
Well, Graydon, there's several reasons I signed Graydon. One is because it's sort of that personal vernacular thing that I like. It's a little bit less intimidating. And the second thing is that there's already a Maxfield Parrish, so it's a way I can distinguish my art from his, who's a wonderful, distant relative. Yes?
What did you want to paint that?
I have been spending the last 2 years plus doing small works. I've been doing, really sort of dove into restudying things. I've been working with charities in Austin, Texas, donated things to the arts community for auction, HIV/AIDS, the Texas Advocacy Project, and I've also had some other small paintings in museums. Austin Museum of Art just bought something. And I'm having a big show next year, so I will let the museum know about that. I also, since I was working on this, had promised a lot of commissions to collectors who I had to beg to be understanding about working on this painting, so I had about 3 or 4 that I had to finish up. Life-size figures, that sort of thing. And my website will be up soon, so you can see this. Anybody else?
Could you talk a little bit about how you obtain such luminosity in your technique?
Well, that is a good question.
Can you repeat the question?
She wanted to know about